I'm Irene Natividad, president of the Global Summit of Women, which is a 30-year-old business and economic forum for women. Normally, we would be meeting in huge groups in different parts of the world, and we are going to in Bangkok in October 14 to 16 of this year. But until then, we're going to bring parts of the summit to you. So today, we're going to be looking at a very important topic, and that is, what does the post-COVID workplace look like? With vaccines now becoming available in different parts of the world, probably not as fast as we would like, but it's coming to you. What will the workplace become in the reset economy? Now, many of you know that a shecession occurred during this time, with more women than men losing jobs because they were concentrated in the industries that suffered the most during this pandemic, in retail, in travel, in leisure, service industries in general. What do we do about that? What do we do about the women who lost their jobs, and some who decided to curtail their professions in order to take care of children? For the first time, we saw a direct connection between caring, our need to care for children or the elderly, and economic activity. If caring doesn't happen, then there is no productive economy. And that's the first time we've seen that direct link, and people now understand, especially those in charge, that those two go together. So there have been other changes that will become permanent. And so today I've invited a stellar cast of experts to discuss some of those aspects of work that will change permanently as a consequence of the pandemic. So let me introduce them to you. Let me begin with Margaret Johnston-Clarke, who is the Global Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at L'Oreal. She has had 27 years of experience, not only in the D&I space, but also in branding, in corporate social responsibility, in philanthropy. Most of her career has been with L'Oreal, and because of the work she has done, she has received the National Order of Merit from French President, and she also received the 2019 Women's Economic Empowerment Award from Global Invest. So welcome, Margaret.
Thank you.
And next, we have Eugene Kelly, who is also Vice President and Global Chief Diversity Officer for Colgate. Everybody uses those products, and it's a $19 billion industry in 200 countries and territories. And Eugene has been involved in not only recruiting, but retaining diverse talent that reflects the world. Prior to Colgate, he has been at Time Warner, at Wendy's, at Hyatt Hotels International. So he brings a great deal of global perspective on this issue of diversity and inclusion. Next, let me introduce Carla Grant-Pickens, who also heads up, there you go, there's Carla, who also heads up the Global Diversity and Inclusion practice at IBM. She is a 20-year veteran at IBM, and she has worked in many parts of the US as well as Asia. And like Eugene and like Margaret, her job is to create an inclusive workplace environment, and also to recruit a workforce that looks like the world. She has another talent. She is an inventor. And so she has an IBM patent for workforce retention and compensation analytics. And that really is unusual. So I don't know whether she does that on the side or part of what she does, but it's wonderful to have an inventor who's also a diversity practitioner. And lastly, we have Nora Villafuerte Garces, who is Nora. Nora is
Yeah, I'm here.
there she is. Um, Nora is Vice President for Human Resources at Nestle, Mexico. Um, and she brings 30 years experience to this. When I first met her, she had this role at American Express. She's also worked at other companies, bringing a total of 30 years experience to HR practice. She has been named one of the 50 most powerful women in Mexico. When she was at American Express and also at Banamex, she was able to bring 3 months leave for adoptive parents. And I tell you, that's very unusual in Mexico. And in Nestle, she was able to put in place 6 months of maternity leave. And because of her work, Nestle was one of the first consumer companies to gain certification. They have that in Mexico for labor equity. So there you have our panel of experts. So let me begin this discussion. When I ask all four of you, what is the one major work trend that has lasting impact that is likely to continue long after this pandemic? You all said remote work. And I have to tell you, that was something all women wanted, flexibility in terms of scheduling and where they work. And now we have it. So let me ask all of you, what are the consequences of that in terms of, recruitment, retention, whatever? So let me go to Carla first.
Thanks, Irene. Yeah, this is a big issue for many companies. And I think that, like you stated, people were so excited about this opportunity to work remote. And what we saw right away was that workplace flexibility did come with challenges and consequences. For employees, it was how to balance work and family life. So they felt like the business day was running into the home life and vice versa. So work never ended, life never ended. So it was just really having a balance of that. It also led to the feeling of some isolation for people who are thrive in environments where they are able to interact. They work best in teams, face to face. People began to share the feeling of isolation and difficulty of that. Also, people felt that it was hard to get visibility, right? Especially in women in diverse backgrounds with the right people, right, in the office. And so that became a challenge. I think that as we think about this model and this kind of new ways in which we will work in the future, I think many companies will think about how do we optimize a model by which we can work remote. We can have maybe a hybrid model. We will potentially have a model where we'll have people that come in the office and some that will work from home, and some that'll be a mixture of part time at home and part time at work. I think we had to look at all of our processes as well, our programs, and recruitment became a really big deal for us. We do a lot of face-to-face events. We would go on campus and recruit at universities. So we had to really use technology to stand up virtual events and make them engaging. And so we had to really become very agile, and we had to listen to employees about their wants and their needs on how this remote workforce was going to evolve, and that we co-created with them to really make it more agile for it to work for them.
Anybody want to add to this?
Yes, I'd love to. It's Margaret. It's very similar at L'Oreal. The whole question right now is this hybrid concept of how to balance between home office, going to the office. Obviously, it depends. We have over 85,000 people worldwide, so we have different traditions, but also different states of the pandemic. what I would like to just add is maybe beyond the agility and what it forced us to think or rethink is that it was a source of great creativity, because we didn't really offer home office as a real option. And so we were getting one more, request from our employees, but because kind of overnight we had to jump into this fully remote situation, it really enabled us to rethink how we recruit, how we onboard, but also how we just organize ourselves on a day-to-day. So there was a huge amount of initiatives to keep the connection between the employees who were by definition isolated at home and the teams. As we are a very creative company, we like to get together. We're also a Latin-based company, so we getting together, thinking, spending time together is crucial in our corporate culture. So how do you keep that while being apart and just doing what we're doing right now? So that's been a huge thing, and we've tested different things, different ways of working, and we're sharing best practices from countries to countries also to see what really makes the most sense. So it's in process, but just wanted to add that.
Yes, Nora.
Yes, I just basically want to add that it's exactly the same thing is happening all over the world. To tell you the truth, I think that we are experiencing the same. But in the case of Mexico and Latin America, one of the things that happened is that working from home was kind of satanized. It was like something that it was not going to happen. It was going to be very difficult to implement. And these forced us to implement it. And one of the big surprises of the pandemic was that the productivity didn't went down. On the contrary, I would say it went up. And now we are facing things such as burnout. But to tell you the truth, I do believe that the balance is very important, because we have to balance the closeness, the team. But at the same time, the productivity is one of the things that I am absolutely happy about it. And I think that eliminate the fear from, and I'm talking top employers, CEOs, to starting working from home in a general base.
And I would think that that's important in a Latin country. In that context, that is not an idea that existed, as you said before. So, Eugene, any positive impact that you could see?
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt. We were always very reluctant to embrace the concept of working remotely and the ability to not have to be in the building or in front of a person physically. And for us, it really allowed us to expand not only the use of our talent and how we procure talent, but it also gave us a wider reach in terms of who we involve in different projects, in terms of how our employees who are being onboarded remotely are able to make contact and get exposure to people who are not in the room or not even in the country. So I think that it has really helped our agility in terms of how we get things done, but also how we view our own culture. Now, at the same time, I worry about the soft negative impacts of how our culture is not face-to-face anymore. And I think that one of the things we have to do is we have to be very careful about how we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, because there are some things that frankly need to be face-to-face and need to have some interaction in order for us to be able to really, honestly feel people, right? To know what certain cultures are around the world, and really body language and things of that sort are very important. So we've benefited greatly, right? But also, as my colleagues have said, we have to figure out a hybrid. We have to figure out what to do when we're able to go back.
Well, that seems to require a major review as to how a company works. I did read a study that showed that women and people of color who are not usually in charge at many levels of a company, tended to indicate that they felt what was mentioned previously, not only isolated, but lacked the ability to be noticed, whether in the elevator or the cafeteria, or those informal connections that are helpful in getting information as well as getting noticed. So that's one thing that has to be worked out. Because when you're doing Zoom calls, you're only dealing with your team, you're only connecting with those who are working on a specific project. That doesn't necessarily bring you to the notice of people across functions. So that's something that does have to be worked out going forward. And also, one of you mentioned balance. And there are women who found they could not balance work at home and the caring work that they also needed to do at home and opted out of the workforce. Also, we're talking about a segment of workers that can work remotely. There are a significant chunk of workers that do not have that option. In retail, for instance, in healthcare, anything that requires you being in front of customers. So this isolation is often mentioned recently. I see in a lot of news articles that has led to mental health being an issue for some workers. So the question I want to pose to this group is, physical health and mental health clearly are now needed in order for a company to function. We found that out, right? If you're sick, if your workforce, for instance, the most visible one is if lots of people in a plant get sick, then that plant can't function, right? So, Nora, let me go to you. Do you think companies should expand their areas of concern for their workforce to include mental health, physical health, which to some extent is covered?
Yes, of course. One of the most important things that we learned with this pandemic was the understanding that we no longer can only focus on development and talent and performance of our employees, but we most closely monitor the health, mental and physical health of our employees. Let me tell you what happened with us in Mexico when the pandemic started. Very soon, we have to send home almost 500 employees, unionized employees from all the factories that we have in Mexico, because they were, either overweight, high blood pressure, diabetes, and things of that sort. So they were more vulnerable to acquire COVID. So as you mentioned before, you can imagine the impact that we have on the production lines that we have. So this had a lot of damage across the organization. So what we did is we already had a program called Wellbeing. We expanded it, and we started very soon for all unionized and non-unionized employees to monitor closely their health. We are reviewing every month their blood pressure, their diabetes, especially their weight, because as you know, Mexico is, I don't know if it is the first or the second country in the world with a problem of overweight. So that implicates a lot of health issues with the COVID. So yes, and not only we are taking care of the physical health, but also of the mental health, because as this pandemic has lasted, the anxiety, the depression, the isolation that we have witnessed in our employees made us implement a very important health program that we are doing with all of them. So yes, I do believe that we really need to monitor them. Human resources in companies are no longer, devoted to one part of employees. We have to see them as a holistic issue. And of course, we have to see the leaders, because if the leaders do not model these behaviors, then we will have an issue. So it's a whole situation that we have that has changed the way human resource work and impact the company.
Great. That sounds like it's an evolving practice. What about the rest of you? Are your companies also looking at healthcare, mental health in a different way during this pandemic?
Yeah, we certainly have, Irene. Early on in COVID, we really noticed right away what a challenge it was to really operate in these new environments. And a particular example that was really organic in our women's community was a woman employer, female employee. She found it really challenging after she dropped off a video call. She needed to care for her baby. She expressed to her team that she felt like she disappointed them. Her young kids were coming in and out of the video. And she just could not balance it all. And her team rallied around her. And as a result of that, this really gained steam, and we created the Work from Home Pledge. And what that meant for all IBMers, not just for working moms, was that we were going to respect and we were going to establish some boundaries. And in that Work from Home Pledge, that included things like family first, being able to focus on personal needs, having a flexible work schedule so that you can attend to those things. Because many kids were home and a lot of parents did not have support, and particularly women, for daycare. People had to be safe. They couldn't get people to come in and help and care for them. They couldn't expose parents or family members that may be willing to help them out to COVID. We even had the Not Camera Ready pledge, where you don't have to turn on your video. You don't have to be pressured to do that. So setting boundaries, taking care of yourself, and then frequently checking in, really having our leaders to think more about staying more connected with their teams, to notice signs of mental health or any type of breakage or support needed or time off. So that was very, very important to us to really focus on mental health. My team, my leaders in my team help with what we call a program called Be Resilient. And that's really around providing employees a collection of resources and tools to equip them on how to handle these stressors and how to balance all of that and how to bounce back smarter and stronger. And then just for all employees to really take advantage of and remove the stigma of mental health, but to really share with them how to get help, but really take care of the total mind, body, and spirit, exercising, hydrating, taking breaks. So those are just some of the few things that we did.
And Nora, well, before I go to Nora, let me just ask Margaret or Eugene, anything you'd like to add to this from your respective companies?
Yeah, excuse me, Eugene. I would add that all of the things that were said already are incredible and things that we are trying to do and trying to do well. But I think the key for us was to try to get our arms around the issue in the first place, right? So we developed, we quickly developed a global task force that brought about people from each of the regions so that we could understand better what the issues were becoming, because each region has its own issues without pandemic, right?
That's true.
And to try to figure out how to blend the two, so that we could first and foremost gain the trust of our employees, right? Because that was, you can only get employees to tell you as much as they trust you. And so what we did was we first told any of our employees that if you felt uncomfortable coming to work or felt uncomfortable going home after work to your family, with then tell us. And we will figure it out. And I think that built the trust. And then it enabled us to get more feedback from them about what it is they're concerned about, and the mental health aspect for a company where people really love working together was a big thing, right? We have employees that a lot of their friends are at work. And so we just really had to work through that issue and then also regionally bring in people, organizations, external partners that could help us with this, right? Because we don't know what we don't know. And we were very, very open to spending some extra money to bring about virtual resources for people to be able to feel better and also to have those parameters.
Great.
Yeah,
It is an evolving thing because none of us ever had to deal with a pandemic at work. So anything at L'Oreal that you want to add, Margaret?
Just maybe very quickly, it's been part of our program in terms of diversity and inclusion to try and work on mental health issues across the company internally, but also externally. Like one of our brands, Maybelline, is very active now vis-a-vis also its consumers and its share of voice. But to come back to L'Oreal, within its employees, it's true that we started off in Anglo-Saxon countries discussing it since 2017, 2018, with a big lead from the UK and Ireland. And what's interesting is that it wasn't necessarily part of the semantics worldwide when we talked about mental health issues. And today with the pandemic, it's become completely normal. It's actually been included within our HR policy. We have a program called Share and Care that's been around since 2013, which works on benefits, parental leave, and different types of important topics. But it's interesting because they launched a specific program called Employee Assistance Program, that was almost like a hotline for employees worldwide to get counsel on mental health issues for them, but also to get advice, help on daycare or how to deal with aging parents. So we've gone beyond, and it's now part of our system, when before it was more of a D&I topic that was slightly on the side and not necessarily understood by all of our countries. So that's been a really great step forward. So yeah.
Thank you. I think these are all wonderful initiatives, and hearing the voices of workers themselves. Nora.
Yes, I just want to add one thing, Irene, which is we copy with pride the pledge that IBM did, and we extended in Mexico with great success. And thank you for that, Carla.
Great.
And not only that, one last thing, the thing that we did with the mental health program that we have in place in Mexico is that we extended to the family that was living with our employee, because we knew that this would have a direct impact in things such as domestic violence or things of that sort. So this program that we have in place is not only for the employee, for all people living with employee in their house.
Wow, that really expands corporate social responsibility. Let me go back to you, Nora. It sounds like companies' responsibilities towards their workers has broadened. As many of you said, nobody talked about mental health of employees before. And now it is something that is accepted as something to be concerned about. So do you think, Nora, there should be a review of benefits and compensation because not everyone has a family to take care of? So how do you balance the benefits that families get as opposed to those who don't have those responsibilities? And how about those that feel, well, I don't really have all these mental health issues, I have these other issues. So do you think we need to look at, because compensation and benefits packages were drawn prior to COVID, and now it looks like companies are accepting that they need to address a wider set of needs among their employees. Nora, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely. We are already reassessing all the benefits package because, as you were saying, Irene, the needs are totally different. And it's not the same thing from one person living alone who is single, it's 25 years old or 20 or 40 years old, but it's single, to someone who is with a family of 3 kids, or someone who is 50 and he has a different set of needs. This is something that has been cooked for a while in Nestle, but I think that now is one of the things that we have to move very quickly. We started this a few months ago. We are not there yet. We are going to review it on a zone level. And we are going to present this to corporate. But the idea, yes, is to, for instance, today, let me give you an example. Probably a car or gas, it's no longer as appealing as it used to be. Having the internet at home is much more appealing, because if you're going to have a hybrid mode in which you're going to be working 2 or 3 days at home and 2 days in the office, because we Latins, Mexicans, we need the physical contact. We need to see each other. So I don't think that we are going to go completely to home office. Some positions will, but not all of them. And what we need to recreate, it's something that it's equitable for all different type of ages or generations, if you want to call it, status and type of work, and type of work, and if you are going to be virtually or if you are going to be mixed or whatever. So yes, we are already working on that.
Well, I think it's a huge issue that companies now need to review. Eugene, you had your thoughts on this.
I mean, all wonderful thoughts and things that we try to do, right? I mean, these are things that you have to address. I think one of the things that we have really tried to make use of is surveys, right? Is to try to ask our employees what it is they feel they need. And we do that pandemic or not, right? So we come back, and what we're finding is that from a diversity and social responsibility perspective, some of the benefits or things that Nora mentioned are key, right? So in our inner cities and in our underserved communities, there's issue with school, right? So their kids can't go to school, and internet. You need internet. You have to have internet, and you have to have it good internet. And so that's something that, in reassessing your benefits and the things that you are offering your employees to not just work well, but to live well and to be well, right? We have a number of families that are, that have generations within their house, 2 or 3 generations there. And therefore, some of the things that work for one generation don't work for the other. So we ask, and then we try to reassess as much as we can. Now it's like steering a cruise ship, but what we try to do is we try to work on a local basis, regional basis with our benefits offerings, in addition to the larger benefits that we offer for the whole community.
Great. Again, a global look at benefits. Carla, I imagine IBM has been doing this for a long time on an ongoing basis.
Yes. And look, like Eugene and Nora stated, we have so many different employee populations in so many countries. And so we had to localize some of our benefits to fit the needs depending upon the geography. But some of the examples of the things that we did we co-collaborated with our benefits organization, and my team co-collaborated with several communities. And like Eugene said, you gotta ask your communities what they want, what they need. And so some of the things that we added was paid emergency leave for COVID, to care for yourself or family members that may have contracted COVID. And that could be any incremental hours, days, single, or week-long stretches, depending upon unfortunate severity. We provided 4 additional weeks of flexible paid emergency leave. We also did emergency backup care. That was a big deal for parents, where they may have needed emergency backup care if the services or the person that may have been caring for the kids or the schools were closed, like Eugene said. We made sure that we provided that as a service. The other thing, like Eugene stated, was, a lot of people didn't have a home setup. They might not have had broadband. You may have a small apartment and you may be sharing that with others. And so we also gave budgets so that employees can ensure that they get the right equipment, so that if they had to work remotely for long stretches, that they were able to do that from home. This became also an issue for our people with diverse abilities as well. So, you know, when you come to the office and we set up all of the flexible accommodations for those communities, the way that they work could be different. So we made sure that we offer the same accessible workplace advantages and allow them to be able to get the necessary equipment and support that they required in their home offices as well. So those are just a few examples of some of the benefits we've added.
L'Oreal?
Yeah,
Margaret?
no, I mean, I think we were in the same sense of making sure that we were being really as inclusive as possible during this period, and still are. So what Carla said about, and Eugene about people with disabilities or people with special needs regarding family, work-life balance, these were all issues that we were discussed locally with not only the D&I leads, but also the HR team. So there was a global policy, but then it was always adapted locally. And it's true that we were able to expand the ways of supporting and of counseling and helping our employees' needs step by step. We're still learning. I mean, obviously, because none of us assumed we were going to go back into lockdown in many countries. So in many countries, schools have reopened. So the whole work-life balance is a little bit different, but making sure that all of the tech aspect, the IT aspect was made available for a company where we didn't do, or as I said before, very little remote. It was a huge switch, which we were able to do in quite an agile way. In terms of benefits, the same, but it's very similar to what's been said. So nothing specific.
Well, all of you are saying that this is an evolving issue because, as all of you also indicated, no one was prepared for this. But now you're becoming even more so prepared. You know, one of the things that also happened because of COVID is increased use of technology. Look, we're on Zoom, right? Nobody thought we would be always meeting not only our colleagues, but our family and friends through Zoom. Automation became accelerated because of the need for contactless encounters with consumers, as well as the use of robots in place of people. For instance, Walmart was using robots to clean the floors, in their supermarkets, to stock, to replace stock of different items. So, Carla, what are the consequences of this, positive and negative? I mean, because everyone worries. I mean, that floor used to be wiped by some person, and now it's a robot that doesn't need health care, that doesn't get sick, and doesn't transmit germs. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that we have to think about what some of these new technologies are going to do to displace workers. And I think that it's important that, you know, there's a plan to reskill and have our workers around the world to build new skills, to do the jobs that can be replaced through technology. And like the one example that you used, through robots. And so it's really, really important that we have a plan for our employees and workers around the world to build new skills to do the jobs for which are in high demand. And that's easier said than done. I mean, I think this is a collective. This is a collective between business and organizations and governments, you know, to ensure that we're always partnering to ready the workforce for the jobs that are here now and in the future. I think that the other thing that we learned is that this can also create new jobs that people can transition to pretty quickly, that if you train them, you develop them, they can pick up quickly. I think some of the technology advantages have been really the use of collaborative tools. For instance, you know, we use Slack to communicate very frequently all day, share ideas. We use WebEx, we're using Zoom, but we use WebEx. And something that's evolved with WebEx is that we've encouraged through some co-collaboration with us to be able to add closed caption in WebEx for those for people with diverse abilities. So that was really kind of a helpful add-on. We also have breakout sessions now in Zoom and all the tools. That was really helpful. You could have a team meeting, but then you can break out and you can get into smaller groups. It's just how, the office would feel, right? And so those things are helping us to figure out how to collaborate virtually in ways in which we would collaborate face-to-face using tools and different creative ways to engage better as we continue through this year of really adapting to the changes that we're experiencing.
I have to tell you that there's been a lot written up about possible changes in business models.
Yes.
As a consequence. Did you know, I was reading an article yesterday that e-commerce took over, right, during the pandemic. And you know the group that adapted to it the most? Seniors.
Wow.
And you would have thought that that's the group that would be least able, to use technology. Are you kidding? They're buying everything, and they tend to have more income. And so that's a big market, if you will.
That's right.
But there are other consequences. Yeah, remote work can mean less use of office space. So commercial real estate companies are getting nervous. Travel companies are getting nervous because now you don't have to go to a meeting in Hong Kong. You could just Zoom in. But I have to tell you, agents like to have person-to-person relationships. So, there's a limit to Zoom. So what about the rest of you? What do you all think about the impact of technology in the workforce?
I just would like to highlight one aspect of tech which we did not expect to see and which has been amazing. So L'Oreal thinks of itself as is a tech beauty company. So we spend a lot of time making sure that we are as tech as possible, using artificial intelligence to be really inclusive, to try to make sure from our product making to the way we recruit, using these assets. What happened in 2020, which was really interesting, was that we discovered how it impacted our learning strategy. It started in China, in fact, last January, and they started a program called Learning Never Stops, which became global, where we were able to touch over 55,000 people in our company with offering online assets. So it could be webinars, it could be e-learning, it could be, as you talked about, Carla, through Teams. We use Microsoft Teams through breakup rooms, interactive, and not just about learning new skills, but it could be about upskilling, but it could also be about how to deal with stress and how to work on mindfulness. So it was a very wide offer that kind of expanded over the year. And this is something that we would have never been able to touch as many people with in-class person-to-person training. So for instance, I'm in charge of diversity and inclusion. We have trained over 45,000 people in 15 years. The jump in 2020 is massive. We were able to train over 20,000 people because we had a captive audience, people were interested, and they took the time to do it because also we varied our offer from domestic violence to sexism to microaggressions to just a wide range of knowledge on D&I. So the point is that was where technology was a real asset. I think as soon as we can, we will try to go back to in-person conferences, interactions, even trainings. But this will stay a new way of upskilling oneself and of gaining more knowledge. So I think that's been a really great learning this year.
Well, that's great. Eugene, I'm going to go to you on another very important issue. During the pandemic, Black Lives Matter occurred in the United States, the plea for racial justice. And that triggered worldwide other evaluations of relationships with minority communities, whether indigenous or Black or whatever color, in countries as diverse as Brazil and Brussels and South Africa and France, in the UK. And there has been quite substantial corporate response, different kinds of companies doing all sorts of different things. So for all of you who are, but beginning with Eugene, who are all in this particular arena, what does this mean in terms of your practice, in terms of your portfolio? Is this just one knee-jerk reaction to a recent event, or do you feel this has legs? That this is something that companies will have to deal with going forward?
Yeah, this one is different. This is thankfully, from my perspective, our young people, our young generation is not having it. Excuse me. And I think one of the things that actually registers with us companies is the future of the sustainability of our client base and the customer base, and who is going to be looking at buying our products. And what is really, really, I think this time, something that, from the Me Too movement and from Black Lives Matter, that we became kind of the center here in the U.S. of what it could be if you don't watch out, if you don't pay attention to to marginalized groups and people who are not being equally served, right? And so for us, it was great because we started out, we in diversity and inclusion have hammered our heads against the wall a lot, right? To no avail, feeling like to no avail. And for me, it's been a time where, it's great. We can actually now make some movement, right? We took this opportunity and took it as an opportunity to create an entire comprehensive global DE&I strategy that involved all of the regions of the world. And we're implementing that now, right? And we looked at key areas like people, right? Supplier diversity, community, social responsibility, and those things are all incorporated into the strategy. And we have put accountability in, right? And so we've said, all right, each one of you regions has to commit to a plan that addresses each one of these issues, and each manager has to have an IO, an individual objective, around that. So again, it was a time where it can't be short-lived. In order for your own sustainability, you have to have a plan, by the way, that our shareholders are asking about, that our consumers are asking about, that social media is asking us to respond to. So this is different.
I got you. There's a company I was reading about, Sephora, that not only is looking as giving more training in diversity and inclusion to its ongoing training, as Margaret had mentioned before, but also now adopting larger brands that impact on their Black customers.
Right.
They're bringing in brands that are owned by, Black women, and having different colors, if you will, in their products that correlate with the different populations.
And they're looking and training at how to treat customers.
Yes.
Of color and women and of disability.
Yes. Anyone want to respond to this part of the question?
Yeah, for us, it was for L'Oreal, it was in the midst of the very obviously tragic setup, and the fact that since 2013, Black Lives Matter had remained a very American topic. What's interesting is in 2020, after the tragic death of George Floyd, it became a global issue. I could see it with discussions with our Brazilian team, with, across Europe. And so what it enabled us to do was to have that discussion with our leadership, our leadership is very engaged on changing the numbers, making a real impact on gender equity, on disability, obviously on socioeconomic and multicultural origins, but because we can't necessarily measure it identically from country to country, it was always a bit of well, it was
amorphous.
more complicated to monitor. Let's put it this way. So what we did with end of May, beginning of June, is that we were able to start engaging with our employees through listening circles on racial issues, on social justice issues, in a very safe space, but also honest discussion with our leadership so that they could hear it. And then we decided to build on and revise our action plans, but also to conduct a research to try and see how we can monitor the specific theme as a global company. Because at this stage, the United States can do it, South Africa can do it in a certain way, even Brazil, but most of the other countries can't for legal purposes, cultural, historical. So how do we find a common language to make sure that that our brands are more inclusive and that our workforce is more inclusive? So I think that this has really had a positive impact. And then we've decided to also launch a few advisory boards in certain important regions of the world, but also at the global level with external voices to also advise us, counsel us, but also challenge us to make sure we stay on target and that we really can respond to our mission, which is creating products for people and of all cultures, all genders. So this is something that's really important. So I think it was a great, in a sense, we seized it as an opportunity, even though it was a very strange way of putting that. But
No, it actually makes sense, because what it did was make companies pay attention, focused attention on something that all of you have been trying to put in place, as Eugene said, banging your head against the wall. And all of a sudden you've got the whole company asking you, what are we doing? You know, because Black Lives Matter activists are asking not only how many African Americans do you have in your workforce, they want to know where they are in the leadership positions, if you will. So Carla, I'm sure you all have done a lot in this arena as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have some great companies here, and all the things that my colleagues here are talking about, we share in this. You know, we are all doing very, very similar things and the same things. And just to add, you know, that greater accountability and transaction with our employees internally, externally, is really, really important. You know, we're setting, and we have been setting meaningful goals. But we have to share progress on how we are meeting those goals, how we are improving representation at all levels, and it has to be really impactful. It has to result in real change, and you have to really put the teams behind it to be successful. And I think we're in a long game, so this engagement is for long-lasting change, and so. We have several initiatives in the U.S. we've put together. We have our PTech initiative where we're skilling up high school students. We're partnering and investing in historically Black colleges and universities. And we committed with 37 other companies, some of which are on this phone, with the 110 initiatives, which is going to be 1 million jobs for Black Americans in the next decade. Yeah. So this is really the work we all are doing, should be doing, and should continue to do. But Me Too, to me, was the crisis that was the precursor to me. One crisis will always equip you to how to deal with the next crisis. And so we've learned from Me Too, we'll learn from this, but my colleagues are right, Irene. This became a human issue, and this resonated throughout the world, throughout all of our IBM locations, and how we'll show up and how we're going to build a more inclusive workforce, no matter what your background, your ethnicity, if you're indigenous people in different countries around the world, if it's the class system around the world, if it's colorism, we are going to be addressing that through our inclusive training offerings that we're going to be launching next week. And we'll be learning about this together to grow together as a company and as an organization. And our leaders are all in, and we're taking accountability to be successful.
That's fabulous. You know, we do an annual, colloquium on global diversity that is usually attended by colleagues of those who are here at this table. And I always say that you guys have to do the work that society hasn't fixed within a timeline with limited resources sometimes, and sometimes without the buy-in of certain key people. So this moment, I think, is very helpful in terms of D&I practice. And Me Too keeps going now with allegations against sports figures. Now, so let me ask this. One of the key findings from during COVID is that violence against women increased dramatically in every country, largely because, companies, families were confined together, and where there is domestic violence, they're together more than usual. And some women have used work as their refuge if they have been abused by their spouses or partners. So what can be done? But is this something companies should be concerned with? Margaret?
Yeah, we, L'Oreal got very involved on this topic in 2018, joining several other companies to start a coalition named 1 in 3 Women, because 1 in 3 women is the number of women worldwide who will go through gender-based violence during their lifetime. So most of those acts of violence are domestic violence, happen at home, don't happen in the street or in the workplace. So we felt very concerned because, well, we have 70% of our workforce are women, and because we noticed that very few businesses were getting involved, and yet it's the only place that victims or survivors can actually disclose or seek advice or help. So the idea is not for companies to replace experts and NGOs in the matter, but the idea is to be able to offer that listening opportunity, and then to be able to connect our employees with the right organizations locally. In 2020, we did do, with this coalition, a whole campaign to raise awareness, not for our people, but outside, making sure that people understood that if they were hearing things because they were stuck in their apartment, that they should reach out, that they had a duty to kind of, so there was a bit of a reaching out and standing up on this event. We also continued our trainings of our employees, and we tried it even virtually. Quite a difficult situation, because these sessions tend to be very, well, they touch upon complicated and emotional issues, and some people don't think they're going to react to this in this specific way, but it happens during the training. So we had to be very sensitive to that, but it worked out, and we worked with amazing NGOs who are professional. So yes, to answer your question, Irene, I think it's definitely a topic that unfortunately has grown in countries like France, where where our headquarters are. It's over 35% increase of domestic violence that is known of, and in many countries it's above that. So yes, I think we do have a role to play in this, to raise awareness, to make sure that we can also offer means. So we found that our employees who wanted to get very involved in supporting NGOs beyond domestic violence, I mean, just generally speaking, this was something that, so we launched a solidarity program, and one of the key actions they wanted to support, obviously with just financially, but was NGOs in this topic. So I think it's one way of raising awareness, but also of making a difference, yes. And unfortunately that is not going to stop, and now we see that it also touches more and more children. So this is definitely something I think we have a role to play.
Nora, Mexico is known for a high rate of domestic violence even before the pandemic. What do you see?
Well, unfortunately, I have to mention that just 3 weeks after the pandemic started, the rate of domestic violence increased from, I don't know, it was something like 30% to almost between 80 and 100%. So yes, that it's a big issue in Mexico, unfortunately. And yes, we are doing exactly what Margaret's saying. We are building awareness. We are, as far as what we were talking about, the mental health support that we are giving. It's not only health support in terms of depression, of loneliness. It's in terms also of domestic violence. And first we have to teach them, the people, how to understand and recognize all the symptoms when they are starting. So we are working on everybody, and this includes domestic violence. And of course, that is part of the workplace culture. But as she was mentioning, this is not something that happens at work. It's something that happens at home. And we have to work
on work.
And that, yes, exactly. That is why we are working on that, because we know that that has a direct impact at work. So it's something that, even though probably HR will have a very subtle limits to address with people, with our employees, we will have to find a way to do it. We're now doing with training, basically, but probably we will move further in the future, because this is impacting the workplace.
Actually, there was a company that Liz Claiborne, it was a clothing company. The CEO of that spearheaded a study that showed the cost to companies of domestic violence in terms of absenteeism, in terms of healthcare, in terms of employee retention, all of that, and corporate culture, of course. So that study was done, and there is in the US a national coalition of companies that have decided to fight this. I'm sorry that we don't have enough time. This is a topic that needs to be addressed far more fully, as well as each of the topics we were discussing earlier. All four of you have been excellent. Everybody now wants to be in each of your companies. But one of the things that has come through in our discussion is that the pandemic brought to the table issues that are evolving, that companies are trying to address, not just day to day, month to month, if you will, that will have long-term impact. And you all are in the forefront of making that happen. There are many companies that are not doing what you all are doing. So your workers, your employees are very fortunate to have you all in place as leading this fight to figure out a way to create an equitable and sustainable workplace. I want to thank all of you for being part of this discussion. And I want to thank those of you who have been part of our audience. I'm sorry we don't have time for Q&A, because I wanted to make sure that we covered these essential topics during this limited time that we have. So looking forward to seeing you again in our next webinar in March during Women's History Month. So goodbye, and thank you again.